She was young, driven, and full of life. Emily Rivera had dreams bigger than the mile-high Denver skyline. A 24-year-old graduate student, she balanced her classes with long hours at a local clinic. Those who knew her described her as the kind of person who could make you feel like the only one in the room with just a smile. She was steady, reliable, meticulous. The kind of woman who planned her week to the minute. So when Emily missed a simple dinner with her best friend Sarah on March 9th, 2021, and didn't respond to calls or texts, everyone knew immediately something was wrong. Very wrong. At first, Sarah thought maybe Emily had simply lost track of time. Maybe she was caught up at work or studying. But by nightfall, after dozens of unanswered calls and a visit to Emily's apartment where no one answered the door, the growing pit in Sarah's stomach told her what her mind didn't want to admit. Emily Rivera was missing. By the next morning, Daniel Rivera, Emily's husband of 3 turbulent years, finally picked up the phone and called 911. His voice was steady, almost too steady, as he told dispatchers that Emily had gone out the previous day and never came back. He casually mentioned that her car was still parked outside, her phone left behind, and that she hadn't said exactly who she was meeting. To the officers who arrived to take the missing persons report, it sounded strange. Even stranger when Daniel, asked if Emily had done anything like this before, simply shrugged and said sometimes she forgot to tell him where she was going. Sometimes he said she would just disappear for a few hours. But Emily's friends knew better. Emily was careful. Emily was cautious. Emily didn't just forget to check in. And then the neighbors started talking. On the morning of March 9th, around 11 a.m., neighbors living directly below the Rivera apartment heard something, a loud, startling crash. Not the ordinary sound of a dropped item or dogs barking. This was something heavier, something violent. It shook their ceiling. Moments later, they heard the familiar rumble of Emily's red Mini Cooper being started up. But something about it was off. The engine hesitated, coughed before pulling away, not like Emily's usual careful driving. It sounded rushed, panicked. Later that night, around midnight, the same neighbors noticed something else. Daniel moving cars around in the shared garage. Emily's Mini Cooper, which had been parked in its usual spot, was now missing. In its place, Daniel's beat-up sedan. By the next morning, the Mini Cooper was back in the garage, but badly parked, crooked, as if someone unfamiliar with it had hurriedly thrown it into a space. Daniel claimed he had been home all night. The officers took notes. Quietly, methodically, they started building a timeline. Meanwhile, Emily's family was reeling. Her younger brother, Miguel, told investigators about an incident just months earlier, a fight so vicious between Daniel and Emily that police had to be called. Daniel had tried to pull Emily out of her own car during an argument. She locked herself inside, terrified. When police arrived, they made Daniel leave the premises, but Emily, fearful and embarrassed, never pressed charges. She stayed. She thought things would get better. They never did. Her friends later revealed the grim truth. Emily had been living under a dark cloud of emotional and physical abuse for years. She had confided to them in whispers about the bruises she covered with makeup, about the therapy sessions she attended in secret, about the plans she was making to leave Daniel for good. Her final therapy appointment was scheduled for March 9th. She never made it. Investigators dug deeper. They pulled surveillance footage from nearby cameras. Most chillingly, they reviewed the Rivera's own Ring doorbell camera, only to find that from 11 p.m. on March 9th to 7 a.m. the following day, the footage was inexplicably missing. Disabled. Only 2 people had access to that system, Emily and Daniel. When asked about it, Daniel shrugged. He had no idea, he said, why the camera had gone offline. Then came the cell phone records. Daniel's phone, the same phone he swore had been with him at home all night, told a different story. Between midnight and 1 a.m., His device had pinged off towers miles east of the city, near an isolated stretch of road called Powhatan. Confronted with the data, Daniel's mask slipped, but only slightly. He admitted, after long hours of questioning, that he had gone for a drive. He couldn't sleep, he said. He needed air. He didn't stop anywhere, he insisted. He just drove, but the officers knew better. On March 11th, the Denver police launched a full-scale search of the area near Powhatan Road. K-9 units, drones, dozens of officers combed the barren fields and dusty roadsides. They searched until nightfall with no luck. And then, the next morning, Friday, March 12th, tucked beneath loose brush along a desolate roadside, they found her. Emily Rivera's body, wrapped in a tarp, hidden, discarded like trash. She had been strangled. The bruises on her neck told a story she would never be able to speak herself. But her body, her silent, broken body, said everything. When Daniel was informed that Emily's remains had been discovered, he barely reacted. No tears, no outrage, no desperate cries for answers. Instead, he calmly asked if he was free to go. He wasn't. He was arrested on the spot, charged with first-degree murder, assault, tampering with a deceased body, and abuse of a corpse. Daniel maintained his innocence, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, claimed he loved Emily and would never hurt her. But as the investigators piled up evidence, the cell phone data, the surveillance footage gaps, the neighbor's testimony, the violent history of the marriage, one thing became painfully clear. This had not been a crime of passion. This had not been an accident. This had been premeditated, meticulously planned, methodically executed, and utterly, chillingly remorseless. Friends and family filled the courtroom as Daniel's preliminary hearings began, clutching photos of Emily, whispering prayers into the cold, sterile air of the courthouse. Everyone braced themselves for the long trial ahead. But no one was prepared for the secrets that would come spilling out. Because Daniel Rivera was hiding more than just the murder of his wife. He was hiding a second, darker secret. A secret that, once exposed, would make even the most seasoned detectives question everything they thought they knew. A secret that would prove Emily wasn't the first and might not have been the last. Daniel Rivera sat stone-faced in the courtroom, flanked by his attorneys. The walls seemed to close in around him as prosecutors laid out the brutal facts of his case. Cell phone records, surveillance footage, the damning gap in the Ring camera data. It all painted a portrait of a man who had meticulously planned his wife's death and executed it without remorse. But the trial had only just begun. Because while investigators had gathered enough evidence to charge Daniel with Emily's murder, they were about to uncover a chilling new layer to his deception, one that would turn an already tragic case into something much darker. It started with Emily's laptop. After Daniel's arrest, detectives seized everything: phones, hard drives, tablets, even notebooks, and buried inside Emily's work laptop, tucked away in a hidden folder, they found a series of emails. Desperate, pleading messages Emily had written to herself. Unsent drafts, therapy notes, and something far more chilling. A list. A list of women. Each name meticulously recorded. Each entry with short, cryptic descriptions. Former co-worker, 2019. Neighbor's daughter, 2020. Bar acquaintance, summer 2020. At first, detectives weren't sure what the list meant. But as they dug deeper, a horrifying pattern emerged. Emily had been investigating Daniel, and what she uncovered suggested that Emily's death wasn't an isolated act of rage. It was part of a pattern. The first woman on Emily's list was Isabella Martinez, a nursing assistant who had worked briefly at the same hospital as Daniel. She disappeared in late 2019. No foul play was suspected at the time. She was chalked up as another lost soul who'd decided to start over somewhere else. But now, her case was reopened. The second woman, a neighbor named Tasha Green, had been reported missing in mid-2020. Last seen arguing with a man matching Daniel's description outside her apartment. Again, no one had connected the dots. Until now. Each case had eerie similarities. Women vanishing without a trace. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no witnesses. And Daniel had been near every single one of them. The prosecution knew they had to tread carefully. Charging Daniel with Emily's murder was one thing. Convicting him of serial killings without concrete evidence was another. But it was enough to paint a picture of Daniel Rivera not as a grieving husband, but as a predator hiding in plain sight. As the trial progressed, witnesses were called to the stand. First came Sarah, Emily's best friend. Her voice cracked as she recounted the final text she ever received from Emily. "Wish me luck. Tonight's the night." Sarah hadn't thought much of it at the time. Maybe Emily was finally leaving Daniel. Maybe she was confronting him. Either way, it would be the last thing Emily ever wrote. Then came Miguel, Emily's brother. He spoke of Daniel's manipulative charm, how he could shift moods with frightening ease, how Emily had once described feeling like a prisoner in her own life. Piece by piece, Daniel's carefully constructed facade crumbled. But Daniel himself remained calm, detached, almost entertained. He showed no emotion when crime scene photos were shown. No reaction when Emily's death was described in agonizing detail. He simply sat there, tapping his fingers lightly against the table, as if counting the seconds until it would all be over. And then came the twist no one expected. A forensic expert testified that small traces of DNA under Emily's fingernails did not belong to Daniel. It was faint, degraded, but it was there, and it belonged to an unidentified male. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Was it possible Daniel hadn't acted alone? Had someone helped him? Or was someone else involved entirely? Prosecutors scrambled. They reassured the jury that the overwhelming evidence still pointed squarely at Daniel. His movements, his lies, his prior violence. But that sliver of doubt was planted now deep inside the jurors' minds. And Daniel's defense team seized it like a weapon. They suggested an alternate theory. Emily had been seeing someone else. Perhaps she had left Daniel voluntarily that night, only to encounter foul play from another party. It was outrageous, offensive, insulting to Emily's memory. But in the cold, calculating world of a courtroom, it was a strategy. The jury leaned in. They listened. They doubted. And Daniel smiled. Behind the scenes, investigators raced against the clock. They re-examined every piece of evidence, every digital footprint, every connection in Emily's life. And that's when they found it. An encrypted backup file on Daniel's personal laptop. A file he thought he had deleted months ago. A file that, when finally cracked open by digital forensics, revealed dozens of messages between Daniel and a mysterious online contact. Someone using the alias Shadowman13. The conversations were grotesque, fantasies about control, violence, domination. The messages hinted at real-world meetings, at experiments, at practice runs, and chillingly, the timestamps matched up with the dates of Isabella Martinez's disappearance, with Tasha Green's vanishing. It became clear Daniel hadn't just killed Emily in a moment of rage. He had been building toward it for years, practicing, perfecting, waiting. Emily had found out the truth and paid the price. The prosecution moved swiftly to introduce the new evidence. The court proceedings ground to a halt as both sides fought over admissibility. Meanwhile, in the court of public opinion, Daniel Rivera was no longer just a wife killer. He was a potential serial predator. The media descended like vultures. Headlines screamed for justice. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding up signs with Emily's face and the faces of other missing women. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere turned suffocating. Emily's parents sat in the front row every day, their grief etched into their faces like stone. They wanted closure. They wanted the world to know the real Emily, not as a victim, but as a fighter who refused to stay silent in the face of evil. Daniel's parents, by contrast, barely showed up. When they did, they sat at the back, heads bowed, as if even they could not stomach the man their son had become. Then, in a shocking move, Daniel agreed to testify. It was almost unheard of. Murder defendants rarely take the stand. But Daniel had a plan. He spoke calmly, eloquently, painted himself as a loving husband, trapped in a failing marriage. Claimed Emily had been depressed, unstable, that she had driven him away emotionally, that she had threatened to leave so many times he stopped believing her. He denied harming her, denied moving her car, denied tampering with the Ring camera. As for the messages to Shadow Man 13, just role-playing, he said. Sick fantasies he never intended to act on. The DNA under Emily's nails? No idea, he said. The midnight drive out to Powhatan Road? I just needed air. He stuck to his lies with stunning conviction. And some jurors, just a few, seemed to waver. Doubt is a powerful thing in a courtroom. It only takes one. In the final moments of cross-examination, the prosecutor leaned in close. You expect this jury to believe that Emily Rivera, a woman described by everyone as cautious, organized, and deeply loyal to her family, simply left her phone, her car, her dog, and her life behind, without telling anyone. Daniel blinked slowly, smiled. People do crazy things sometimes, he said. The courtroom froze. It was a subtle moment, barely a whisper. But in that smile, in those 5 words, every ounce of Daniel's mask cracked. He knew Emily was never coming home, because he made sure of it. The jury retired to deliberate. Hours stretched into days. The public waited. Emily's family waited. The world waited. And then, after 79 grueling hours, the foreman emerged with a verdict in his trembling hands. But just before the judge could read it aloud, a deputy raced into the courtroom, whispered something urgently into the prosecutor's ear. The prosecutor's face went pale, and slowly, she turned toward the judge. Your Honor, she said, voice shaking, we have received new evidence. The room exploded into chaos. Emily's family gasped. Daniel's lawyers shouted objections. The judge pounded his gavel for order. But it was too late. The investigation had uncovered something else, something even more monstrous than anyone could have imagined. And Daniel Rivera was just the beginning. The courtroom was a swirling storm of confusion. The foreman clutched the verdict in trembling hands. The judge's mouth, half open, froze mid-sentence. The new evidence had come without warning, slamming into the trial like a wrecking ball, and whatever it was big enough to stop the entire proceeding cold. Emily's family sat in stunned silence, hearts pounding. Daniel Rivera's face, once smug and unreadable, had finally changed. For the first time, he looked nervous. The judge ordered an immediate recess. The jury was sent out. The attorneys huddled at the bench, and the courtroom emptied, leaving only whispers behind. The new evidence wasn't just a minor detail. It was a bombshell. While reviewing archived 911 calls from the surrounding areas around Powhatan Road, a dispatcher had stumbled upon something disturbing. On the night Emily vanished, at precisely 12:47 a.m., a woman's voice had called 911, breathless, panicked. The call lasted only 28 seconds. The only words captured were, "He's here, please help me." Then a loud crashing sound. A scream, silence. The call had been filed away, miscategorized, written off as a pocket dial or prank. Until now. The voice was faint, distorted by wind and static, but voice analysis technology compared it to recordings of Emily speaking. The match, 98.6%. There was no doubt. Emily Rivera had tried to call for help in her final moments, and whoever he was, she knew him. Detectives immediately began reprocessing all digital data from the night of March 9th. They found more. Security camera footage from a rural gas station 15 miles east of Denver, grainy but clear enough to identify a car. A small red Mini Cooper pulling into the lot around 1:15 a.m. Behind it, another car, a black Ford pickup truck. Emily's Mini Cooper never left that gas station. It was driven back to the city later by someone else. And the Ford truck? Registered to a man named Lucas Holt, an old friend of Daniel Rivera, a name that hadn't appeared once in Daniel's trial, until now. Lucas Holt was a shadow. No official job, no fixed address, just a long string of misdemeanor charges, disorderly conduct, battery, stalking. Nothing that had ever put him behind bars for long. But buried in Lucas's record was a minor citation from 2018, trespassing at the same hospital where Daniel had once worked. Coincidence? Detectives didn't think so, and neither did the prosecution, because Emily's private emails, the ones hidden deep on her laptop, revealed a chilling clue. 3 months before her death, she had written a message titled simply, Lucas. The message detailed how Daniel had introduced her briefly to an old friend named Lucas Holt, a man she described as unsettling, watchful, too interested. Emily wrote she felt unsafe around him, that Daniel brushed off her concerns, that she suspected Lucas wasn't just a friend, but something far worse. Investigators dug harder. Phone records showed that Daniel and Lucas had been in contact dozens of times in the weeks leading up to Emily's disappearance, calls that Daniel had never disclosed. Financial records revealed cash withdrawals from Daniel's account, thousands of dollars at a time. Surveillance footage showed Daniel and Lucas meeting in person, exchanging packages, envelopes. The pattern was clear. Daniel hadn't acted alone. He had help. And if Lucas Holt had been at Powhatan Road that night, it meant Emily's murder was even more sinister than anyone had dared to imagine. It wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a conspiracy. Daniel's defense crumbled overnight. The court moved to sever the verdict and schedule a new hearing. This time, not just for Daniel, but for Lucas Holt too. An arrest warrant was issued immediately. But when police stormed Lucas's last known address, they found nothing. The house was empty, the windows smashed, the walls spray-painted with frantic, incoherent messages. "You won't find me." She chose wrong. Daniel promised. Inside the bathroom, scratched into the mirror. Powhatan was just the start. Lucas Holt had vanished, and the nightmare wasn't over. Detectives scrambled to track Lucas's movements. Credit card activity stopped. Cell phone dead. No sightings. But then, a break. At a gas station in western Kansas, a clerk reported a suspicious man, dirty, paranoid, paying cash for fuel and supplies. Security footage confirmed it. It was Lucas. He was on the move, heading east, running. Meanwhile, back in Denver, Emily's family demanded answers. If Lucas had helped kill Emily, why? What was the connection? Was it simply loyalty to an old friend? Or something deeper, darker? The police theorized a horrifying possibility. Daniel had been grooming Lucas for months, maybe longer, building trust, promising money, offering the one thing Lucas craved above all else: power, control. Together, they had plotted Emily's death. Together, they had silenced her. And if Lucas was desperate enough, he might not stop at just running. He might kill again to cover his tracks. The FBI joined the manhunt. Every highway, every motel, every truck stop between Colorado and Missouri was monitored. Alerts went out to the public. Be advised, suspect is armed and extremely dangerous. But Lucas had a 2-day head start, and he knew how to disappear. Weeks passed. Lead after lead dried up. Hope faded, until an anonymous letter arrived at the Denver Police Department. A single sheet of paper smeared with dirt. Handwritten words. You're looking in the wrong place. Start with Crescent Lake. No signature, no return address. But stamped onto the envelope was a fingerprint, one that matched a previous arrest record. Lucas Holt, Crescent Lake. A forgotten reservoir on the Nebraska border. Remote. Empty. The perfect place to hide something, or someone. Search teams were dispatched immediately. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Divers entered the cold, murky waters. Dogs sniffed along the muddy banks. For hours, nothing. Then, just before dusk, they found it. A shallow grave. Inside, not the body of Lucas Holt, but someone else, a woman. Unknown, mid-20s. Decomposed beyond immediate identification. Hands bound, bruises on the neck, signs of long-term captivity. This wasn't Emily Rivera. This was someone else entirely. Another victim. Someone they hadn't even known was missing. The implications were terrifying. Daniel Rivera and Lucas Holt hadn't just murdered Emily. They had hunted, planned, perfected. Emily wasn't the beginning. She wasn't the end. She was somewhere in the middle of something much bigger, something that spanned years, states, and dozens of potential victims. Daniel was in custody. Lucas was still out there. And now investigators faced a chilling question. How many others were there? And worse, was Lucas planning to take another victim before they could catch him? Because by the time authorities unearthed the shallow grave at Crescent Lake, Lucas Holt had already crossed 2 more state lines. And in a quiet, unsuspecting town hundreds of miles away, a young woman named Lily Evans had just gone missing. The discovery at Crescent Lake shattered any remaining illusions about the scale of the nightmare Daniel Rivera and Lucas Holt had unleashed. The unidentified young woman buried by the water's edge was just the first crack in a dam ready to burst. And now, somewhere across state lines, another woman, Lily Evans, was missing. The race to capture Lucas Holt became a national obsession. Every news station, every online outlet plastered his mugshot across screens with one simple warning: armed, dangerous, predatory, do not approach. Back in Denver, Daniel Rivera sat isolated in his prison cell, the walls closing in tighter each day. Prosecutors informed him of the new charges: conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to multiple kidnappings, serial homicide. Daniel said nothing. No denials, no confessions. Just that same blank, dead-eyed stare. He had gambled that he could control Lucas. He had gambled and lost. Meanwhile, federal agents tracked Lucas's movements through a patchwork of gas station receipts, stolen vehicle reports, and desperate witness tips. They finally narrowed his path to a tiny town in Missouri. Population 1,200. A place where neighbors rarely locked their doors. And that's where they found Lily Evans's abandoned car, tucked behind an abandoned barn. Empty. Keys still in the ignition. Blood smears on the driver's side handle. Time was running out. The standoff came 3 nights later. An anonymous call. A neighbor spotting a stranger lurking near a secluded farmhouse. Dozens of law enforcement officers surrounded the property under the cover of darkness. Inside, Lucas had barricaded himself and Lily Evans. For 9 excruciating hours, negotiators pleaded through bullhorns. Lucas didn't respond. Finally, tactical units moved in. A flash of light, the crack of gunfire, and it was over. Lucas Holt was dead, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Beside him, battered and terrified, but alive, they found Lily. The world exhaled for the first time in weeks. Justice had come, swift and brutal, but the scars left behind would last forever. In the aftermath, authorities pieced together the full, horrifying truth. Lucas Holt and Daniel Rivera had created a dark, twisted pact years before. Bonded by mutual hatred, shared fantasies, and an insatiable hunger for control. They had stalked vulnerable women. They had practiced. They had escalated. Emily Rivera had seen the cracks. She had tried to escape, and for that, she had paid the ultimate price. But her courage, even in her final moments, her desperate 911 call, her hidden laptop notes, helped expose everything. Emily had not died in vain. Her bravery had brought monsters into the light. In the final trial, prosecutors unleashed the full weight of their evidence against Daniel Rivera. The secret messages, the cash exchanges, the co-conspirator testimony, the grave at Crescent Lake, the surveillance footage, the GPS data, witness after witness, expert after expert. By the time closing arguments began, the verdict was inevitable. After only 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty on all counts. Daniel Rivera was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 250 years for the conspiracy charges. He would die behind bars. And for the families he had shattered, it was a small, bitter shard of justice. The lessons we must never forget. Emily Rivera's story reminds us that evil often hides in plain sight, behind polite smiles, behind closed doors, behind the masks of normalcy. It shows us the importance of listening when victims speak, even in whispers. It teaches us that red flags should never be ignored, that patterns of control, isolation, and violence are never random. Emily fought to break free. She fought for her life, and even in death, she exposed the monsters lurking in the shadows. We owe it to her, and to every victim who never got the chance to speak, to keep fighting, to keep believing survivors, to keep demanding justice, and to never, ever look away. If you found Emily's story as powerful and heartbreaking as we did, please take a moment to honor her memory. Share her story. Speak out against abuse. And always trust your instincts, because sometimes it can save a life. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories that need to be told. And remember, evil only wins when good people stay silent. Stay safe, stay aware, and until next time, stay vigilant.